Now, live from the Cake Studios, this is Cake News on your side at 10.
10 years ago today, a town a little more than 100 miles west of Wichita would be thrown into the national spotlight.
This is from the National Weather Service in Dodge City. They have issued a tornado emergency. This is very rare.
One of the most powerful tornadoes to hit the U.S. in years tears through the town of Greensburg.
It's not home anymore. We don't have a home.
A look back on the pain.
Our souls are broke, you know, but we are here and we're still alive. And I thank God for that.
And the destruction.
This town is completely just about destroyed. There's nothing left.
And in the middle of the devastation, something buried deep within this Cakeland town.
It'll come back. It will. It doesn't look like it right now with all the devastation, but it will.
Greensburg, 10 years after the disaster. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jim Grimes. You're watching our special coverage on this, the 10-year anniversary of the Greensburg tornado. Deb Ferris joins us from Greensburg now, where the city is remembering that day. And Deb, we're told something special was planned for tonight.
Yeah, Jim, a very solemn and emotional night here in Greensburg. A memorial right behind me. A ceremony held tonight for those who lost their lives 10 years ago. It was about 15 minutes ago, 9:45 p.m. on May 4th, 2007, that massive tornado wiped out the entire town of Greensburg. It left 11 people dead and hundreds more injured and homeless. Now, earlier tonight, there was a ceremony at a park nearby here called Starlight Park to honor the victims. Artists worked to build this sculpture. It's called the Beacon, and it will be displayed here for years to come.
This, to me, just shows the growth and vitality that this community and the resilience that we've had.
And that was just one of many services held tonight. Just about an hour ago, there was a memorial held behind me. There was a balloon launching, there was music, there were all kinds of things to remember the survivors and those who lost their lives. Cake's Morgan Downing joins us live now with more on that part of today. Morgan.
Hundreds of people came out here tonight for this memorial service. Those people were standing right where I am just moments ago. A moment of silence was held this evening, marking the time that tornado ripped through this community 10 years ago. Now, for some, 10 years seems like a long time ago, but for the people I spoke with, the effects are still being felt. 11 people died and they were remembered tonight. Each of them had a story, and those stories were read out loud. The victims ranged from farmers, veterans, even people who were just traveling through the town that night. Balloons were released in their honor, and President George W. Bush sent over a video message commending this community for its resilience. Many people moved away, but a lot of them are back here in Greensburg tonight. The fire chief says people are still healing, and the memorial was much needed.
I think it's still part of the healing process. You know, we walked around here for days in shock. We didn't know it at the time, but as we learned and talked to people, it was all part of the healing process because, this was our home.
And one of the victims honored tonight was Harold Schmidt. And today I had the opportunity to sit down with Schmidt's widow, Sarah. She was here tonight with their children. She told me she tried to move away from Greensburg after the tornado, but something called her to stay. This home sits at the corner of Main and Grant in Greensburg. Today, it's a home filled with love, despite what happened in this spot 10 years ago.
A lot of the memories aren't quite as vivid as they were.
Sarah Schmidt says as time goes on, her wounds are healing, but she'll never forget the EF5 tornado taking the man she loves.
It just kept getting worse and worse, and when I got home, I told Harold, I said, we need to get to the basement now.
Sarah and her husband Harold hunkered down in the dark basement underneath their home, which was one of the oldest in Greensburg. When the tornado barreled through the night of May 4th, 2007, the Schmidt home went with it.
And it just picked the floor up, turned the house one and a half times, took it across the street over there.
Moments later, a pickup truck landed in their basement with them.
When I told him that there's a truck in the basement, he answered me, yes, I know, it's on me.
10 days later, Harold died. 10 years later, his wife still calls this plot of land home.
Once I got back to Greensburg, there was no question this is where God wanted me.
Schmidt has had health trouble lately, and her family is going through a tough time right now. How do you keep pushing through this hard time?
God pushes me. It's not me. It's God's will that I do that.
And Schmidt told me she is happy the way the community honored her husband and the rest of those victims who lost their lives. She says it's good to see people still care. Deb.
And that massive tornado that came through Greensburg 10 years ago and left all of that devastation drew the attention of the nation. In fact, relief efforts were brought in from all across the country. Just 4 days after that tornado hit, then President George W. Bush came to Greensburg to get a firsthand look at the damage. The president toured the town and offered support to Greensburg residents who lost everything.
I am struck by the strength of the character of the people who live here in the plains. People who refuse to be who refuse to have their spirit affected by this storm.
President Bush returned to Greensburg 1 year later for the commencement address for the 2008 Greensburg High School senior class. He said the students set an example by finishing school and helping the town to get back on its feet. So many incredible stories of survival. The one you heard from Sarah Schmidt just a few minutes ago. So many different tales. People have been coming up and telling me what happened to them that night. It's just amazing to hear. We talked to one young mother who had a 9-month-old baby that night, and she was hiding in her house alone.
10-year-old Jaden Koss thumbs through picture books from when he was a baby. While he can't remember, he knows this was the time when he and his mom narrowly escaped death.
This is the ruins of our house.
We're watching a very dangerous situation unfold.
Jaden and his mother, Kelsey Schroth, were home alone in their Greensburg house on the night of May 4th, 2007. She wasn't paying attention to the weather, but her family was. They kept calling and telling her to take the baby and get next door, where there was a basement. Next door, Dennis McKinney was waiting for Kelsey and Jaden while watching the storm approach.
I was yelling for him to hurry up. The glass blew out on the south side of the house. I turned around and started running down the basement steps that were right behind me.
He couldn't wait. The tornado hit.
It was too late. Went to go open the door and it wouldn't budge. It was just the pressure.
Kelsey took Jaden and hunkered down in a closet, grabbing a mattress for cover.
Pretty soon you just start hearing the walls crack and baseballs coming through the window, and then everything went dark.
Next door, Dennis and his 13-year-old daughter hid in the basement bathtub.
But I thought it was going to come through on top of us, and so I'm praying for our safety. And my daughter never once prayed for us. She just kept praying out loud, asking God to protect Kelsey and her baby.
Greensburg took a direct hit from the EF5 tornado.
Right over here, there was a small pile of rubble.
Today, Dennis walks on the concrete slab where Kelsey's home sat 10 years ago. He remembers crawling out of the rubble of his own home and seeing complete devastation.
I just thought they were dead because there was nothing left.
But then he heard a voice.
I can remember I heard people walking around in the rubble, and I just started yelling. I said, "We're here, please help us, please save my baby."
Neighbors jumped in to help, pulling little Jaden and his mom from under the only part of the house left.
And pretty soon, Mr. Hedrick pulled some things back, and there was this little boy there, about 9 months old, and his eyes were this big around, and he wasn't crying, and picked him up, and we were looking him over, and he didn't have a cut or a scratch on him anywhere.
While Jaden may not remember, just hearing his mom tell the story brings tears to his eyes.
It's okay, Bubba.
A decade later, the emotion of that day remains.
We're here by the grace of God, basically. We definitely had some guardian angels on our side that night.
And I always thought miracles were something other people got to see, but we got to see one.
Definitely a miracle that night for so many people. And Kelsey tells me that when there are severe storms coming through, she for a while would have panic attacks. And now, even if there's a severe thunderstorm coming through, she and her son definitely go hide in the basement. Now, this morning, a very special ceremony. The Greensburg students were at the school's football stadium for a balloon launch from New York's Thank You Foundation. That group was formed after the 9/11 terror attacks. Its members came to Greensburg 10 years ago and had 220 kids then paint Stars of Hope. Today it returned to launch a balloon with a camera and a tracking device attached with one of those Stars of Hope.
And this Star of Hope that we're sending up to space was actually painted at the 9/11 memorial 3 weeks ago, was in Jerusalem 2 days ago, and now is going to go into space with the kids here in Greensburg.
And away it went, but unfortunately not as planned. The wind today was so strong it blew the balloon into a power line, and the camera tracking device were cut loose, so of course they'll try again another time. Now, an incredible 95% of the town of Greensburg was destroyed that night by that massive tornado, 1.7 miles wide, wider than the town itself. Well, tonight, Cake's Lily Wu takes a look back at one of the survivors.
And all of a sudden, poof, house just started flying apart in pieces.
You just can't fathom the damage, even in the dark. And when light comes tomorrow, it's just going to be devastating again.
No pastor, no family, no one in Greensburg was immune to the tornado that ripped through town on May 4, 2007, reducing businesses and homes to rubble.
We had no walls, windows, roof, nothing, as was everywhere I saw whenever the lightning would flash.
The home of Bob and Ann Dixon was among those destroyed. Winds topping 200 miles per hour flattened 95% of Greensburg.
I don't know what kind of a value. We could never rebuild anything like this, but in the big picture, it's stuff.
Now, 10 years later,
instead of going 2-story, we rebuilt 1-story because as I get older, I don't want to have climb stairs.
Instead, Bob Dixon is running Greensburg. This grandfather and former postal worker has been the mayor since 2008.
What people see in Greensburg right now, they see hope that communities can survive if they choose to be informed, involved, and engaged in their community.
Before the tornado, there were about 1,400 people living in the city of Greensburg. 10 years later, that population is now at 850.
This is when they built our home.
Among those who stayed is Nancy Reed.
We knew we were going to build back. We knew we were coming back. This was our town. This was our home.
The Reeds rode out the storm in their basement. She vividly recalls that frightening night.
All you could see uptown was ragged pieces of wood, and I mean, this town was destroyed. It was unreal. Never want to go through it again. Never do.
But on the anniversary, she remembers those who died in the storm.
It's tough, and on that day, you can't help but think back. You can't help, and you know you're also thankful.
Gratitude found by those who survived it all.
It was a defining moment in all of our lives.
For years, Greensburg has been rebuilding and redefining itself as a green city fitting of its name.
I think about what we've accomplished. I think about what we've been through, and I think about what other communities have been through.
So on this anniversary, those who survived are once again offering gratitude to those who helped rebuild Greensburg.
Everyone in this community right now today that chose to rebuild and chose to rebuild a business are true leaders.
In Greensburg, Lily Wu, Cake News.
And the mayor tonight also giving a short speech talking about the faith that this community has. So many people lost so much, so many tears were shed. And he said to the folks who are here tonight, he said, all we need to do is love each other. We'll have more from Greensburg when we come back.
Weather Radio Tuesday this week.
Well, we were here in Greensburg. Next week, we're going to be in Hutch. We're going to be at the Dillons, the one at 3200 Plaza East Drive, between 3:30 and 6:30, programming your weather radio. Doesn't matter whether you buy it there or bring it, we'll make sure it is programmed properly for the peak storm season. For the complete tour list, go to kake.com/weather radio. Complete weather forecast coming up later on live from Greensburg.
This is Cake News at 10 with Deb Ferris, Jim Grimes, Sports with Jay Shannon, and meteorologist Jay Prater with your Cake First Alert forecast. Cake News on your side.
We'll return to Greensburg in a moment, but first, these stories. The state Supreme Court in Topeka is reviewing the case of Reginald and Jonathan Carr. They were sentenced to death for killing 4 people 17 years ago. The state Supreme Court later overturned that death sentence, and the U.S. Supreme Court overturned that decision. The brothers are again challenging their fates, claiming that the state's law is flawed. Well, the man who was captured in Kansas after a multi-state crime spree is also facing charges in Mississippi. Alex Deaton was indicted in Mississippi by a grand jury there for allegedly strangling his girlfriend and killing a 69-year-old woman at a church. Police say he then drove to New Mexico, where he carjacked a couple before driving to Pratt, Kansas, and shooting a convenience store clerk. A Kansas police chief is back behind bars after violating the conditions of his bond. Terry Eberly from the Wakini has been arrested and charged for blackmail, intimidation, harassment, and several other charges. Well, today a district court ordered him to be rearrested after he had discussed that case with another law enforcement in his violation of his release. He's at Trego County Jail right now, awaiting a hearing this Monday. Well, in this week's Crime Stopper, an armed robbery is in the middle of the night over in East Wichita Walgreens. It happened on April 21st around 2 a.m. The man walked into the Walgreens at Harry and Edgemore. He's described as a white male wearing a mask, gray hoodie, and sweatpants with some kind of logo on the left leg.
He was armed with a handgun, pointed the gun at several of the employees inside. I can imagine that they were all pretty shooken up by what happened and did get away with a significant amount of cash from the store.
Well, he left the store and was last seen running across the street. If you have any information, you're asked to call Crime Stoppers. The number is 267-2111. You could be eligible for a cash reward. Still to come, we'll head back out to Greensburg as we continue our special coverage on this, the 10th anniversary of the deadly tornado.
Now your Cake First Alert forecast with meteorologist Jay Prater.
Well, you know, I was working this evening 10 years ago, and you looked at these radar signatures and you knew what nature was producing that night, and you just...
A very large tornado. Okay, I don't know who reported a wedge. We have 2 tornadoes on the ground, Jay.
That's when Lanny Dean was confirming the wedge crossing US 183 just to the southwest of town. You never think that the work you do 10 years later is going to wind up on the wall of a museum somewhere, but in this case it has. Very moving ceremony tonight here in Greensburg to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of that tornado. And in addition to the videos that are part of it, the track that we were showing earlier is on the wall here, along with some of the radar representations as it came through town. Here it was back southwest of town, and then as the circulation got just to the northwest, you can almost see the vortex hull in the center and the debris lofted with it. So some very vivid memories here. 11 people in Greensburg losing their lives to this storm, and then 2 others, one in Pratt County and another over in Stafford. But let's talk about the weather now. Let's get you outside. Here we are live with our WeatherBug sensor back in Wichita, West and 13th, where it's 55 degrees and the winds have calmed down. Hayes, Central Care Cancer Center KCAM, it is clear and 51 with the winds out of the north at 3 miles per hour. Garden City, Central Care Cancer Center KCAM, where it's 56 and the winds are out of the east at 5 miles per hour. The final stop in Goodland. There's the Frontier Ag Cam, where we've already cooled to 50 at Renner Field. So let's talk about temperatures. Mostly 50s, as cool as 48 in St. Francis. And yeah, it's going to be a chilly night tonight, but let's go back over the past 6 hours. Those little puffy clouds we had earlier, those have pretty much dissipated, and we're going to keep the sky clear. So it's going to be one of those chilly nights, and then tomorrow will be sunny, and we will continue the nice warming trend. So here we go for Wichita and south central Kansas. Tonight will cool down to about 44 in Wichita. The winds pretty light out of the north-northwest, and tomorrow a lot of sunshine. Look at that, 74 degrees. You want to warm up? It's on the way. We'll be up to 80 by Sunday, and as we get lower 80s Monday and Tuesday, and then chances for thunderstorms back Wednesday and Thursday in the forecast. Across north central Kansas, all right, here we go. Mostly clear for the rest of the night, lower 40s. Tomorrow we'll get back into the sunshine, mid 70s. And here's your planner. Look at the sunshine. Look at the warmer weather. 78 Saturday, 80 on Sunday with a bit of a breeze. We'll put some storm chances back in the forecast starting on midweek. At western Kansas we go. The wind has finally settled down. It's going to be pretty light for the rest of the night. 40, Garden, Dodge, Greensboro, also in Colby. And then tomorrow we'll be back into the mid 70s. Enjoy the warm up because 80s are on the way. 82 Saturday, mid 80s Sunday. And then the next chance the storm starts small Tuesday and gets a little bigger. And across northwest Kansas, all right, we're looking at 80 on Saturday, 82 Sunday, and Tuesday we'll start putting chances for thunderstorms back into the forecast. So once again, we're live here in the Big Well Museum in Greensburg. The whole history of the town, of the well, and of the tornado, it's all here for you. I'm meteorologist Jay Prater. More Cake News coming up after this break.
Was a big day in the nation's capital as President Donald Trump scored his first legislative victory. The House voted to repeal Obamacare and replace it with new legislation. Despite the passage, the Affordable Care Act will remain in place at least for now.
So we're immediately reducing premiums, saving billions and billions of dollars.
The current bill will leave as many as 24 million Americans uninsured over the next decade, and the bill could also weaken the popular Obamacare provision protecting people with pre-existing conditions. Of course, it still needs to be approved by the Senate. Also today, the president signed another executive order to ease restrictions on religious organizations. Those tax-free groups have been barred from endorsing candidates and using tax-free dollars to back politicians. Those rules were put in place 6 decades ago by President Dwight D. Eisenhower. When we return, we'll head back to Greensburg.
All right, welcome back to Greensburg. It has been a very long day for a lot of folks out here. Jay Prater joins me now. And Jay, just looking back on the day, a lot of emotion, a lot of people coming to town to talk about that night.
You know, and think about it. 10 years ago, we were at work. The tornado was still in progress. And even after what became known as the Greensburg tornado, that storm was still threatening life, limb, and property as it impacted Pratt County, impacted Edwards County, Stafford County. And the storm kept producing even smaller tornadoes all the way up into Ottawa County when the storm finally transitioned and started producing some damaging wind gusts before it even started to dissipate. So we focus, and very rightly so, here in Greensburg because of the destruction, because of the 11 deaths. Yet that was a night where more people could have been put in harm's way. Nature provided us with, fortunately, a once every decade or so outbreak. And thank goodness that the technology exists where the forecast earlier that day was right. The technology detected the tornado and the communications was there. The integrated warming team worked. Weather service, chasers, media, it all worked together.
It did. And you know, there are still more events for the rest of the weekend. Let's take guided walking tours of the town. Started at 10 a.m., 1 p.m., and 3 p.m. At noon, there's a community lunch at the Big Well Park. And then at 2, a showing of the Greensburg 10-year documentary file at the Twilight Theater. So a big weekend. Lots of people will be here, and we appreciate you watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
For breaking news and your most accurate local forecast, Cake News is on air, online, and on your mobile. Cake News on your side.